For me, I take advantage of it both for cost, tapping into labor pools that I couldn't necessarily afford in the US, bringing on additional expertise in-house versus outsourced to an agency to try to keep that work closer, having our data and our systems more, firewalled in-house rather than having outside agencies, but also just that time zone agility and trying to go faster in today's market.
Hi, welcome to SaaS Half Full, the only show serving B2B SaaS marketers. I'm Lindsay Grober, EVP at PanBlast. And as always, I will be both your host and bartender today. Our conversation today is with Wendy White, the CMO of Daxko. And today we are tackling how to work with distributed teams across the globe, this follow the sun execution model. How's agile in nature, make sure it doesn't become chaotic. How do you work across time zones with your teams to ensure success when you're structuring your marketing team on a global scale? So if you care to, grab a drink and join me as I speak with Wendy. Hey, Wendy, welcome to SaaS Half Full.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
I was so glad to see that you agreed to come on the show. We had just seen each other in person a couple weeks ago at the Empowered CXO retreat, no longer CMO retreat, which you have been attending for 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, about that.
Okay, I'm a little bit longer than that, but always a good time. For those of you listening who don't know what that is, it's an awesome get-together put on by Sixth Sense where 100-ish women get together and they are all B2B marketing and revenue leaders. And Sixth Sense does it up right. Shout out to Latney. It's always an incredible event. But here we are now on the virtual world of podcasts. Thank you for joining me. I was able to get you a cocktail kit. It wasn't the one that you originally requested because apparently that was out of stock. But what did we send you instead?
We got a sunrise margarita here, which is smells delicious. I haven't tasted it yet, but I will guarantee it's a delicious, charming orange margarita.
Perfect. Well, thank you for mixing that up. I went classic because I was just coming in the door from an event today downtown. And so I have a vodka soda, which, can't go wrong with a little bit of lemon. So cheers. Thanks so much for joining me.
Cheers to you.
So the topic that you want to talk about today, I was actually shocked that we've never covered this before. We're going to talk about the follow the sun agile execution model, working with teams all over the globe, specifically as it relates to your marketing org. And this is not necessarily a new model. It's one you've been doing for quite some time. So I was surprised when I looked back and went, we've actually not talked about this before. So I'm sure people can learn a lot from you today about this. But before we dive in, wanted to make sure that our listeners get a little taste of who you are, Wendy, personally. If you could give us a little background on how you got started in B2B SaaS marketing, and then certainly what your role is today and what Daxko does for those that don't know.
Yep. Okay. So first, on myself, I am older than sin. So I'm a 30 plus year B2B marketer. I was not in SaaS that long, so it didn't exist in the old days when I started. But I've done B2B my whole life. And I would kind of divide my career into 2 chapters. First chapter, a lot of big company stuff. Intel, Motorola, Microsoft, running, corporate comms or product marketing or solution and, campaign marketing, a lot of demand gen stuff. My last job before I left Microsoft, I was running advertising operations for that company. So there was probably the one and only time that a budget I was helping manage was started with a B, not something I have seen a lot in my career since then, because I kind of stepped off the edge of the cliff and left Microsoft and became a Series A CMO.
Big change.
Yeah, big change. So I've been doing SaaS for about 15 years, all in kind of C-suite level positions, CMO. Current role, I actually have 3 divisions. I have the marketing division. And in addition to that, I also run a large professional services team that is like an agency for our clients. We do websites and digital marketing. And then I also run our partner and channel division.
Okay. A lot on your plate.
Yep. Yeah. And then as far as what Daxko is, if anybody is into fitness, like I seem to be really into fitness now. I was saying I'm on a health journey and I am all about lifting heavy, which all women over 50 need to do. Yes. Daxko is software you've probably interacted with if you've walked into a YMCA, if you've walked into a Boys and Girls Club, if you've walked into many of the major gym chains, or if you've gone to a local martial arts or Pilates or CrossFit studio, you've probably touched our software. We power all of those. And we do about 40% of the gyms in the United States run on Daxko software.
Awesome. I have definitely, just based on what you've named off, I have definitely interacted with your software. No question asked. So most of our audience is going to be B2B SaaS marketers. So we'll frame our conversation with that lens. You mentioned before I hit record that you have been working with distributed teams globally in this model for almost 20 years, which you think about 20 years ago, just the tools that we had available for communication, for project management, visibility, all that stuff, night and day difference now. So let's think about it from today, though. The follow the sun agile execution model, what does that mean for in practice for SaaS marketing leaders today?
Yeah. So a little bit about how my team is organized. The vast majority of the marketing that my team does is actually in the US, but the vast majority of my headcount is not in the US. And it's because, we're taking advantage of two things. One is obviously cost, right? You can bring on into your team, into your organization, expert digital marketer for, anywhere between $15,000 and $18,000 if you hire them in India versus hiring that expert digital marketer in the US. And then the second thing is taking advantage of the clock. So if you can have roles that are working a little bit more transactionally or a little bit more offline, then you can create briefs and work in the US and hand it to be done to your team overseas, and then, pick it up the next morning and finish it. That doesn't always mean it's the same work, with one team starting it and somebody ending it. That maybe complete work can happen overseas, but that's a model that you can take advantage of. For me, I take advantage of it both for cost, tapping into labor pools that I couldn't necessarily afford in the US, bringing on additional expertise in-house versus outsourced to an agency to try to keep that work closer, having our data and our systems more, firewalled in-house rather than having outside agencies, but also just that time zone agility and trying to go faster in today's market.
Yeah. So I'm hearing cost efficiency being a priority and speed as well. How do you organize? Well, actually, before I ask this question, how do you find the talent?
There's two answers. There's probably three answers, but I'll say you can decide that you are going to get serious about hiring in a given market and set up a tax entity there. And that's a bigger company strategy decision. In my instance, current company, we did decide to make that decision and stand up an entity in India so that we could hire in India as an example. You can use some kind of forward-placed organization that does the hiring for you and manages in market. I have a team in the Philippines. They're not employees, but even though we treat them like employees, we hire them through a third-party company that provides the office space, provides the computer setup, and manages their payroll. But we specify which employees we give performance coaching. They work for us in a full-time capacity. So those are two ways you can do it. And then obviously you could tap into a big marketing services agency and hire a temporary staff through them, which acts a little bit like the second one as well. Mm-hmm. I've done all three models. There's ups and downs to each.
Yeah. Assumptions, it's always recommended that you partner with your HR team, HR leaders on this if this is a model that you're looking to explore, because there are certain, from a payroll and tax implications, that there are nuances that many marketers wouldn't have exposure to.
There's absolutely nuances. Like, for example, I had hired most of my staff in India before I happened to be on a trip with our chief legal counsel, and we got over there and he said, oh, by the way, we've informed by, E&Y that your team on the ground can't be doing, these activities, which mostly related to being involved in the actual sale of the product, the actual contracting and writing the contract. As soon as you do that, then you owe taxes in the local market on top of owing taxes in the United States. So understanding the tax implications of what kind of activities are taxable or non-taxable, and also understanding that HR rules in a given market are super critical.
Did you bring this model into Daxko when you started, or was this like a belief system that they already had it in a way of work?
The way of work of having overseas teams was definitely in Daxko started by the engineering organization. And they were actually using an outsourcing agency when I first arrived. Marketing had never placed roles outside the US. And actually, didn't really have that many agency relationships either. It was really oddly in-sourced, which also meant that people were doing way too many roles. People in our US teams were wearing way too many hats. They were forced to be generalists and specialists in multiple areas, which didn't make sense. So very hard to be T-shaped in a lot of areas and move a lot of things forward. So we had a lot of that, which meant that things were not very agile and slow moving. So when I came in, the first thing I did, which is easy to do, was started hiring a team in the Philippines because I had a previous relationship with a great company called Flat Planet, who has an expert pool of marketers that you can tap into, and they can hire very fast and bring really good talent because they have a great network there. And I still use Flat Planet. Many of our digital marketers and devs are sitting in the Philippines still. So I did that. And then once the company made a decision to stand up an entity in India, I started shifting from some roles from the Philippines to India, mostly because I do like the idea of having employees versus staff aug. And, even though I say our folks in Philippines, we treat them very much employees and they feel like our teammates. But also because, while you can get a great price in the Philippines, again, that's the cost. You can get 2 people in India for the price of 1 person in the Philippines. So you're always trading off a little bit of the time zone sheet into the afternoon versus the morning. There's all kinds of stressors on, are you doing an end of the day handoff or the beginning of the day handoff? And how many hours do you have on the West Coast versus the East Coast and overlap? A lot of trade-off decisions to make when you decide to augment your team with staff overseas.
So what tools do you leverage? What do you have in place to keep Agile from turning into total chaos when you have so many different time zones and teams everywhere?
Well, I would say that we made a lot of mistakes through that process of how to do that. And we're still, tweaking that and getting better. Number one is that we have very tight workflows in Asana for process, et cetera. And we've had to redo that a couple times as we've learned what worked and what didn't work. I'm using things like crazy numbers of subtasks and, having a task be with one team versus multiple teams. A lot of people probably think Asana, Monday, Asana, right, whatever your tool is, don't let that tool drive your team. You drive the tool. We had, built out, our ops team had built out one version of what we thought the workflows were. And after, I would say about 6 months of just all the back channel of this doesn't work and that doesn't work and complaining, we kind of threw it out and started over with a little bit more tops down direction on how workflows should work and expectations of teams, starting with our leadership belief in how we want to work to flow and what we wanted the RACI to be, which didn't really happen the first go round. What really happened the first go round is the execution teams decided the workflows, and they were all kind of optimizing their workflows for themselves versus how work needed to be managed from a leadership perspective. So I think a real lesson there, if you are a CMO and you actually don't know the workflows before they get implemented in a workflow tool like Asana or whatever, stop and take a pause and make sure you actually dig your head in there. Or that you have real good systems thinkers at the leadership level who knows how that work should flow. Because I know otherwise you'll do what I had to do, which is unwind and start over. And a lot of finger pointing and team friction can come out of that, which is the worst thing you want from a cultural perspective.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned Asana. In terms of communication and also just visibility, I mean, Asana does provide that, but also just team accountability. Sort of who owns that? They all sit under sort of the marketing org, but who's responsible for ensuring that this really is a seamless team?
Well, everybody owns that, right? And all the managers and leaders own that. And it actually helps me understand pretty fast who's a leader that drives accountability and can say that versus who's a leader who passes the buck or points fingers. It tells you a lot about the leadership style of your managers when you start to see how they're using those tools and how they're planning handoffs and where handoff gaps are and who's a strong communicator and who's not. The other thing I would say is be super careful about Slack. Slack is a black hole for project failure. If it's not part of your workflow and conversations about products are happening in Slack versus actually in the Asana ticket or in the workflow tool, that does happen. And what happens then is then it's very hard to know where the accountability is. And also it becomes, again, a lot of lost work and finger pointing. So Slack is a fantastic tool and collaboration, like asynchronous collaboration, but try to force a lot of that back into your workflow tool.
Yeah. At Panblast, we're a PR agency, and all of our clients are B2B SaaS companies. Our client contacts often are global and located in other regions. And it definitely has been a learning process over the years on just the cultural differences in the way of work and work expectations. So how do you account for those cultural differences working with teams in other regions, and also to train your teams that are based here on maybe some of those cultural sensitivities that they need to know about?
Well, I think the first thing is having open and frank dialogue about things like work hours and expectations. What was interesting when we first started implementing having teammates, like teammates in Manila, teammates in India, is how easy it is to slip into a mentality of that's the support team. This is the decision team in the US, and that's the support team over there. Yes. And so they should snap to my meeting schedule, and they should snap to my schedule and my needs and how I communicate. I'm not saying that some of that, shouldn't be true, but that's role-based, not necessarily location-based. So one is making sure that you're having really good cultural conversations with your management team about how you're creating a team culture of accountability, collaboration amongst each other, and really actually focused on mutual respect as part of that. Mm-hmm. So I was discovering that, for example, teams were calling meetings that were super critical to have, folks from India. They were calling them at 10, 11, or 12 in the morning, which was 10, 11, or 12 at night in India, and not thinking about the fact that that person was having to get online or just miss the meeting, or that minutes weren't taken, or that meetings weren't recorded, right? All of which are good solutions to, expanding the number of hours a day we could have meetings, but also just making sure you're thoughtful about stacking up the hours and what happens during those kind of crucial overlap hours. So for me, I'm on the West Coast, and I make the conscious decision that my workday starts at 6. And I do that so I can maximize my overlap time, but I only do that Monday through Thursday. I don't let my teams pull India folks into meetings on their Friday night. Go have Friday night, be fun, right? And I also need my sleep in day on Friday. I'm exhausted. I need that extra just half an hour, before my meetings start. But you got to start with empathy, start with respect, right? Start with asking the questions about what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what are your hours. Have a plan for your hiring process to account for that. In particular, it's not uncommon in markets like Manila or Delhi, for example, for people to work what's called UK hours, which is in Delhi, 12 to 9. It's completely normal for people in Manila to start at 4 a.m. It's part of their city culture because they're optimized around afternoons with their kids. Right. So they all start at 4 a.m. and go on, and they're done by the early afternoon. They're off hanging out with their kids, going shopping, whatever. And it's a comfortable thing, but you have to understand those nuances. And then you got to teach your team to respect the boundaries and to have empathy for the situation. And it takes compromise on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Since they're being treated as team members, do they each have a manager that's responsible for his or her success?
What I have discovered, one of the big discoveries for me over the last year, is that I needed to layer on a little bit more of a team lead structure or management structure on the ground. Because culturally, interestingly, for our team, it's greatly expanded. I have 30 something people in my Delhi office out in Noida. A lot of those more junior people need the day-to-day coaching. And so they need a local manager, because that tiny bit of time zone overlap you have is really focused on strategy and planning and reviews. It's not focused on, hey, coach me on how does this work? And you don't want those people waiting all day for somebody to come online in the US to answer a question. Right. They've lost their time. So I have switched my strategy a little bit more about having more local managers, so that there is just somebody there to reassure, answer questions, approve time off, give that day-to-day coaching especially for the more junior staff.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And do you have physical office space for these teams? You do?
Yeah, fantastic physical office space. I personally have gone over already, a few times. I'm going over in about a month again. And what I would say is that cultural interchange of actually spending time there in the office. Our teams in India really want to spend time in office. Our teams in the US, they really want to work from home. A lot of the Gen Zers might want to be in the office, but, All the rest of us, I'm happy to roll out of bed and put, my makeup on and get in my chair in 10 minutes. I'm happy to do that. But the folks in India, they really love being in the office, and it's a big cultural part of the experience there. Now, one of the benefits, the reason why we're able to attract such top talent there is because we do have a really flexible work schedule. We have flexible PTO, and we only require them to be in the office on my team Fridays.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you found that there are roles within the marketing function that are best suited for filling overseas?
Oh boy, I think you need to really understand your collaboration with other teams and what roles you have in the US. So product marketing at a more senior level is pretty tough to put overseas unless the product team for that product is sitting in that market, right? So this is a lesson I learned when I was at Expedia. If the product team and the product owners were sitting in India, then you could put your product marketing manager there because then they got a lot of time zone overlap. They could plan better, et cetera. For us, we tend to put a tiny bit more transactional roles there. So my data and analytics team is there. A lot of my HubSpot team. So we're doing all the programming of that. A lot of the kind of data enrichment teams are there. Design teams are there. Content marketing is there. What I don't pull over to there, I don't pull my PR or my executive comms team there here. The campaign teams that need to collaborate day to day closely with sales or be on the ground at events, those are here in the US. So you just got to think about the roles that can operate through Asana tickets and operate more independently. You could put those there. The ones that you really need that, in time zone collaboration in the US, that doesn't make as much sense. It puts a lot of stress on the time zone on people on either side if you're doing that.
Okay. And do you have any specific KPIs in place to know if you guys are just listing, I'm air quoting, if it's working? If this model is working for you outside of that, it's faster, it's cheaper. Do you have any yardsticks in place?
Yeah, I'm trying really hard. We just hooked up our Asana to Power BI so we could pull all our Asana data into Power BI dashboards. Turns out one of the big bugs or lack of features of Asana is it counts weekend days as work days. So if you're trying to say we have a 5-day turnaround SLA, if there's a weekend in the middle of that, you got to figure out how to suppress that out. But so we're actually pulling a lot of data on Asana. Things we're looking at are, speed of execution, honoring the goals we have around SLAs. We're looking at, content, number of revisions on a piece of content, right? If that number of revision is 6 or 7, something isn't right. Something's not working, right? So we're starting to think through what are measures of a workflow success versus what are measures of team success? What are measures of, by kind of functional area? And then how we build that out in Power BI and look at that so that we can get a sense of if we're improving. If our number of revisions has gone down from 9 last year to 6 this year or 2 or 3 this year, we're finally getting the workflow, but it could just be the team's more senior now and they understand the messaging better. Right. So who knows? We're still kind of instrumenting that. But the whole hack of hooking up your Asana to a Power BI and giving you dashboards, you don't get a lot of that good stuff out of Asana. Out of the box isn't as robust in reporting as you kind of want it to be.
Yeah. Looking ahead, do you feel that AI tools will decrease the need for distributed teams, specifically in executional roles, or do you see this model, this follow the sun model, being something that starts to be explored more within the SaaS industry because maybe they have less headcount as it is? They're actually being asked to reduce, people with tools.
It's the question of the hour, isn't it, Lindsay? I keep saying to my team, be prepared, right? Let's all be prepared that a board is going to come back and say, we believe based on AI, you could do this job with, X% fewer resources, or you could go Y% faster. So far, our boards have been great. What they've said is we want it to be a force multiplier versus we're going to squeeze the EBITDA. They're not telling us that yet, right? Now, I always believe that can come, and it probably will. So right now, I'm treating AI as a force multiplier. And what I mean by that is a very deeply trained chatbot that a US person who is in product marketing is keeping trained on personas, all the testimonials and the pull quotes from customers, what we're hearing in sales meetings, et cetera. That is almost as good as a full-time product marketing coach for content teams, to bring that nuance into the content first go round. And so that allows you to produce better content on earlier revs and also more content at higher volume. And that for us is proven out. We have dramatically improved the volume of SEO content this year. We're working now on our kind of campaign and adoption content quality going way up because we're really doubling down on, I got an AI ops person we put in place. That person is monitoring the GPTs, keeping them trained and effective. Every time we have a new campaign or a product launch, taking that new messaging and feeding it in there. So I think we should be doing better, but still we're treating it right now as a force multiplier, not a headcount reduction tool.
Right. Okay. You had mentioned some mistakes and things you've messed up along the way, talked about not letting Asana run your team the other way around. Any other lessons learned that you wanted to share today?
I think you have to think really, really hard about team culture and time zone in terms of that compression window for when you have the time zone overlap, right? And what happens during that window and what doesn't happen during that window. So for example, I just moved my staff meeting to later in the afternoon so that we could have clear up that, morning time zone for more overlap meetings. You got to think a lot about the stress and the strain on your employees and your managers that might have to start earlier or stay later on both sides, and just make sure it's worth it. And in some areas, maybe we're discovering maybe it not being worth it because it just puts too much stress on certain team that from a management perspective. But you gotta be open to, I think, listening to your team, always using feedback, looking at the data, all of that, just like you do for any other part of marketing, right? Like this same kind of thing. It's, is this employee effective? Is this process effective? Is this model effective? You got to be open to that. So, I will say we had some real struggles getting our content marketing quality where we wanted it to be. And it's because you just don't have enough time to coach with that number of hours overlap. I think the AI is really starting to help us there, and we're starting to see some real impact. So I don't know yet.
Okay. No, that's great advice. And it sounds like where you've seen success is by embracing a lot of flexibility, a lot of transparency, and realizing that this isn't just like an out of the box solution that you're going to say, we're going to scale here with these people, scale here with these people, and go.
And be willing to tweak. Like, my initial financial model didn't have a design manager in India, but it became clear that if you're going to have a bunch of junior designers, you kind of need a design manager on the ground. So like, okay, I'm adding that role now. Though all those things make sense, but they're maybe not always as apparent at first. Yeah.
Yeah. No, this has been super helpful. And I too I love the concept, and I wrote it down here, that you got to get out of the mentality of like the decision team is here and then the support role is there, that we're not running the show and delegating, but we're a team that's running this together. Like, and sort of equal business value, if you will.
Equal business value, all teammates, we're all collaborators. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's probably a different mentality than maybe people went into this conversation.
I will tell you, as a company, we have monthly company awards, and there's a nomination process every month into those monthly company awards. And 3 out of the last 4 months, a teammate in India has won one of those awards. A teammate of ours in marketing in India has won one of those awards.
Love that.
They're having incredibly high impact on the company.
That's incredible. Well, this has been great. I ask all of my guests the same question to send us out, which is, do you have a favorite or signature toast to send the episode out?
Oh boy, I wish I did. I happen to speak a little Russian from my days doing propaganda in the army. Completely different story. But na zdrowie, which is to your health.
Love that. I'm not even going to try to attempt to say it. We've had a lot of languages, but not Russian yet. So love that. Wendy, thank you so much for joining me. This was awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Wendy for joining me on SaaS Half Full. That was a great conversation. Can't believe we've never tackled that topic before. If you're thinking about starting a distributed team or are just in the early phases of it, hopefully you took a thing or two away today on how to make that team dynamic successful. I always appreciate the listen, and until next time, bottoms up.